All right. Had a request to do something about some vocal mixing techniques. Here's what I like to do. Of course, start off with a compressor. Makes it nice and easy. You just kind of want to touch it a little bit.
Well, their hearts dark and their heads big. You think it tight cause he riding in the Maybach Benz. So they blaspheme the king. They forget that he was still Lord way back when. Before the Big Bang doing big things. His name was still almighty way back then. So go ahead.
So this first compressor just kind of, takes some of the transients down. This is kind of a dynamic verse. And I don't want too much of it coming at you right away and popping at you. So you don't want a really fast attack. You want to get a little bit of those dynamics in, but you don't want to, just kind of want to smooth it out a little bit. Next, I like to take an EQ, low pass it, and then just kind of dip out some low end.
Well, their hearts dark and their heads big. You think it tight cause he riding in the Maybach Benz. So they blaspheme the king. They forget that he was still Lord way back when. Before the Big Bang doing big things. His name was still almighty way back then.
So what this does is it gives you some high end without having to boost high end. When you just crank this,
well, their hearts dark and their heads big. You think it tight cause he riding in the
everything gets really SE and you're causing phase distortion, and it just doesn't help things. It doesn't make anything better. It makes it worse. Your first natural reaction is to just boost high end to make vocals really airy, which really you're just making them sound tinnier and out of place and not good. So after we do that, I like to take another EQ, and I like to use that one to just kind of find the bad spots in the room or the mic, and kind of just dip them out a little bit.
Well, their hearts dark and their heads big. You think it tight cause he riding in the Maybach Benz. So they blaspheme the king. They forget that he was still Lord way back when. Before the Big Bang doing big things. His name was still almighty way back then. So go ahead, laugh now but cry later when he return to slay that grin. He set the sun in the sky. It's perfectly shining his rays on the land. The orbits of planet were made with his hands in no order. Cannot disobey his command. Look what he shaped with his...
And then you just want to find a little bit of the SE-ness up here.
Well, their hearts dark and their heads big. You think it tight cause he riding in the Maybach Benz. So they blaspheme the king. They forget that he was still Lord way back when. Before the Big Bang.
So his big S is hitting at 720. So we know that for later when we put the de-esser on. So we've got this EQ dipping down, and then we've got this one dipping some more frequencies. I'm not boosting anything. I don't like to boost, or at least now I don't. Before I always used to, but I wonder why my mixes sound horrible. And that was why, a big reason. Anyways, so on to de-essing here. We'll just listen.
Well, their hearts dark and their heads big. You think it tight cause he riding in the Maybach Benz. So they blaspheme the king. They forget that he was still Lord way back when. Before the Big Bang doing big things. His name was still almighty way back then. So go ahead, laugh now but cry later when he return to slay that grin.
Alright, so I'm just moving through this really fast, but just to get you some tips here. Also, I like to end after I EQ. I like to compress again, so that way we know we're not compressing a bunch of low end or extra garbage. We're just getting the good EQ'd signal, and you kind of smooth it out once again after that.
Well, their hearts dark and their heads big. You think it tight cause he riding in the Maybach Benz. So they blaspheme the king. They forget that he was still Lord way back when. Before the Big Bang doing big things. His name was still almighty way back then. So go ahead, laugh now but cry later when he return to slay that grin. He set the sun in the sky. It's perfectly shining his rays on the...
Alright, there's some room sound in there, but I don't really like, but it's, kind of we got to take care of it somehow. But anyways, we're going to get some room sound going here.
Well, their hearts dark and their heads big. You think it tight cause he riding in the Maybach Benz. So they blaspheme the king. They forget that he was still Lord way back.
So I learned this trick from Carl Napa. He kind of runs the EI Institute over in St. Louis. If you want to learn some stuff, get in touch with that guy. Go take a class over there. He's got his stuff together. He knows what's going on. So this is something I kind of picked up from him. He likes to use a whole bunch of different reverbs. Right now I'm just using an ambient reverb right here.
Well, their hearts dark and their heads big. You think it tight cause he riding in the Maybach Benz. So they blaspheme the king. They forget that he was still Lord way back when. Before the Big Bang doing big things. His name was still almighty way back then. So go ahead, laugh now but cry later when he return to slay that grin.
And then a plate.
Well, their hearts dark and their heads big. You think it tight cause he riding in the Maybach Benz.
So another thing I like to do on this plate is de-ess it a little bit before it comes in. what that'll do is just make sure you don't get that tss in the reverb, you know.
Well, they hearts dark and their heads big. You think it tight because he riding in the Maybach Benz. So they blaspheme the king. They forget that he was.
So this is going to be a lot different, obviously, when you have the beat or the music behind it. But now, you know, you kind of hear a little bit of, you know, a little bit of reverb glue, as, you know, people call it. Another thing you can do is put a light amount of chorus in on these vocals. Here's a
well, they hearts dark and their heads big. You think it tight because he riding in the Maybach Benz. So they blaspheme the king. They forget that he was still Lord way back when, before the Big Bang.
You got to be careful with that one. Don't put too much, or else your vocals are just going to fade back, and they're not going to be at front. This kind of gives them a little extra air and lets them sit on top of the mix. So here is without everything.
Well, they hearts dark and their heads big. You think it tight because he riding in the Maybach Benz.
Okay, put everything back on.
Well, they hearts dark and their heads big. You think it tight because he riding in the Maybach Benz. So they blaspheme the king. They forget that he was.
There's still something going on in the high mids that I want to take care of. Not sure exactly where it is.
Well, they hearts dark and their heads big. You think it tight because he riding in the Maybach Benz. So they blaspheme the king. They forget that he was still Lord way back when, before the Big Bang doing big things. His name was still an almighty way back then. So go ahead, laugh now.
There we go. It's a little better. Anyways, I mean, that's the quick version of it. Obviously, you'd spend more time with it. You know, you could also do some manual de-essing, you know.
Well, they hearts dark and their heads big.
Here on this first one.
Well, they hearts dark and their head.
Hearts. It's really hitting it hard.
Well, they hearts dark and their.
S afterwards, so you can kind of dip that down a little bit.
Well, they hearts dark and their heads big. You think it tight?
I don't know. Just something you can do to kind of help with your S. If somebody's really S-y, you know, that'll help take care of it a little more. Anyways, hope this helps. Take it easy, guys. Let me know if you have any questions.